Hey guys, my name is Daniel Coffeen, and in this series I give you all tips and tricks on what worked for me in Ranger School. If you haven't seen the first video in this series, make sure you check out this link right here and watch that one first.
Florida phase, also known as the swamp phase of Ranger School. Florida phase takes place in Eglin Air Force Base, which is right off the western panhandle of Florida. Depending on what time you go, it's going to be either hot or cold, but I can guarantee you it's always going to be muggy. So if you think about Darby being your crawl phase and mountains being your walk phase, then Florida phase is definitely your run phase. Your missions get a little bit more complex, but your success rate is going to be higher. You're going to have the autonomy to execute missions the way you see fit, but you're going to be expected to utilize unconventional methods to get to your objective. This is the phase where you actually start to feel like a real ranger. In fact, you're so badass, you get to wear Dark Eye Pro now.
So, very similar to mountain phase. You have your watercraft and survival training, you have techniques, and you have your Florida FTX. So think of this part as the mountaineering part of mountains, only you're learning watercraft skills, which are things like a rucksack raft, or a rope bridge, or zip lines to throw your weapons across a body of water. Then you're also learning about survival, and mainly it focuses around the different reptiles that you're going to be encountering during your FTX in Florida. So there's water moccasins, copperheads, all kinds of snakes like that, alligators. So you basically learn about the slow and painful death that you're probably going to experience if you get bitten by one of these things. So this is also very similar to mountains, but every phase has its own way that they want you to pitch the order. So that's something that you really have to pay attention to. That's really the biggest change. Everything else is pretty much the same in techniques. You do a few days of classroom style learning, and then you move to non-graded patrols, which pretty much last the majority of the day. The good thing about techniques though is that it's not very stressful. You have a lot of autonomy to operate the way that you want to. Your hours are fairly reasonable. You get to bed at a decent hour, and you get 3 meals per day. So you get 2 hot meals, you get a hot breakfast and a hot dinner, and then you have an MRE for lunch. You also have a good amount of time to eat in the DFAC, so you actually get to enjoy your food. Now the same rules apply. Eat as much as you can, as often as you can, because you're gonna need it when you transition over to 2 MREs per day in the FTX. There is a specialty at the Florida DFAC, and that is their French toast. I honestly didn't think it was as good as the blueberry pancakes, but others could disagree with me. One very unique thing about Florida phase in techniques and also in the FTX is something called lightning lockdown. So when I was in Ranger School, I was there in the summer, and there was a ton of thunderstorms. I guess that just is their typical weather. But anyway, anytime there was lightning that sounded like lightning right there. Anytime there was lightning that was present, the RIs would blow a whistle and they would call lightning lockdown. And what lightning lockdown meant was everyone dropped their gear, waterproof it, and then everyone scatters throughout the woods and just takes a nap for hours at a time. I remember being on lightning lockdown multiple times a day for several hours. It may seem like a waste of time, but that rest is certainly needed, especially when you don't recycle and you're just freaking emaciated. So also a really cool thing about techniques is the different chaplain services, but I felt like the Florida chaplain services were the best ones, and that's because they always had food. Yeah, sometimes in Darby we got some food. Sometimes, I don't even think we had one. Actually, I don't think we had one in mountains. But man, the chaplains in Florida, the snacks were unreal. Okay, so this is a 10-day FTX, very similar to mountains. 1 mission per day and 1 leadership swap at the ORP or security hall. Very, very similar to mountains. Only the platoon leader and platoon sergeant are the ones that swap out. Squad leaders stay consistent the entire time. So some of the major differences between the mountains FTX and the Florida FTX. So in Florida FTX, you spend a ton of time in the patrol base in the morning. And what I mean by that is you wake up at 05, you say the Ranger Creed, you do your sensitive items inventory layout, you eat your MRE, and then you get your order. You go through your orders process, you go through your troop leading procedures, and then you don't even SP till around 1600 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So you spend a ton of time in the patrol base. So the majority of that planning leadership's grade comes from patrol base operations. Very little of it actually comes from movement. Now, due to those long hours in the morning in the patrol base, you still have to cover a ton of ground for your mission. So most of that ground is covered at night. So there's lots of long night movements that stretch you out to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. But contrary to mountain phase, you are actually able to occupy your patrol base in whatever way that you want to. So I'd recommend combat football because it's so much easier. Everyone just drops their rucks and basically takes up their fighting position and maintains security that way. The RIs in Florida really didn't bother us in the patrol base very often. They very rarely ever checked our sector sketches or anything like that. So all of those tips that I recommended back in mountain phase, I still recommend using those, but ultimately you really don't have to worry about them messing with you. Also, during those long night movements, you're gonna be attacked. So Op 4 is out and about at night. And that's something that that second leadership group is gonna have to be cautious of, because you're gonna get hit and there's really no way to know when it's gonna happen. And as soon as you cross wherever their Op 4 are, they're gonna hit you. So you're gonna have to react to contact, conduct battle drills and stuff like that. Up until this point, I really haven't talked much about the swamps or why they even call Florida phase swamp phase. But towards the end of your FTX, you're gonna do 2 swamp movements. You're gonna do the Weaver and you're gonna do the Boiling. Now, when I mean swamp movements, I really mean you're gonna be moving through a swamp. You're gonna be wading through neck deep, yes, neck deep water with rucksacks on, with weapons, with machine guns. It is incredibly difficult. You're gonna be walking through mud that as soon as you step in, the mud comes all the way up to your thigh. And you are just moving very slowly through these swamps. And depending on what class you're in, who your leadership is, who your RIs are, you may do these swamp movements during the day or you may do them at night. The biggest piece of advice when it comes to swamp movements though is stay as close to the person in front of you as you can so they can help you if you get stuck, and also untie your weapons tie down, because if you're holding a 240 and you're in neck deep water and that 240 gets stuck underneath a tree branch or gets stuck underneath something like that, you're going down with it and you're not coming up. So make sure your weapons are untied. In addition to the swamp movements, you're also gonna be doing a lot of water movements along the Yellow River. And you're gonna be utilizing Zodiac boats, basically big rubber boats that you can fit like 8 to 12 people in, and you paddle them. And you get a lot of that training during the watercraft orientation in the first phase of Florida phase. But the biggest thing on these Zodiac boats, especially if you are the squad leader or the team leader or in any type of leadership position, is to constantly be tracking where you are on the map. The route is predetermined by the RIs, but you still need to know where you are on the map, because those RIs will turn around to you and say, all right, squad leader, point to the map and tell me where you are right now. And let me tell you this, it's not that hard to do that on land, but it is very difficult to do that on a river, because you have to pay attention to all the bends, all the twists, all the terrain that's around you. And when he asks you where you are on the map, you have very little time to answer. So you have to be on point about that. Okay guys, so this is really important to note. See how soft this sand is right here? This is the exact type of terrain that you're gonna be walking through in Florida phase. So this, over a long period of time, is very, very challenging and not very fun to walk through, especially when you have a 100-pound rucksack. So if you're trying to figure out ways to train, to get ready for Ranger School and to prepare, I would say find some soft sand, put a heavy ass pack on your back, and start walking. Also, now that I see this, it just came to my mind, and this was brought up to me by my good friend Devlin McDermott, who talked to you guys about in mountains. But when you're carrying a 240 or when you're carrying a 249 machine gun, that sling goes right across your neck, the back of your neck. And man, after 60 days of carrying that thing, your neck gets pretty raw. So, see this thing right here? This frame of my rucksack? If you throw that sling and hook it around here, instead of on your neck, that helps a lot. It takes all the pain off your neck, and it helps keep your rucksack high and tight. So there you go, there's just a little tip for you right there. So another cool thing that takes place towards the end of the Florida FTX is the Santa Rosa mission. And the Santa Rosa mission takes place on Santa Rosa Island, but for the first time ever, you're not conducting a platoon operation, you're conducting a battalion operation. So there's like 8 or 9 different platoons all hitting the same objective. And so depending on what platoon you're in, and if you're the decisive operation or a shaping operation or whatever, you have different roles. So it's actually a really, really cool mission. There's a lot of water movements, and this is honestly like where I actually started feeling like a real ranger. Like I was maneuvering, I was shooting, I was calling in indirect fire. Like it was actually a really, really cool mission. So Santa Rosa mission is something to look forward to. So after the Santa Rosa mission, you guys are pretty much done. And like I said in the beginning, your success rate for your platoon is really high at this point because you guys are such a well-oiled machine. In fact, my platoon had a 100% go rate. Actually, my entire company had a 100% go rate on all of our patrols. Like, it's very difficult to no-go a patrol in Florida because all of your ranger buddies, they are pulling for you. They are doing everything they can for you. And this is where everyone is really supportive of one another and willing to do whatever it takes. Of course, there's some outliers, but usually everyone's on the same page. And I can honestly say that my Florida platoon was the best Army platoon that I have ever been a part of. The best team that I've ever been a part of. Just a cohesive machine, and it was like everyone was one step ahead of each other and just always just helping each other, and everyone was just incredibly kind to one another. It was night and day difference from mountains. So the last thing you do in Florida before you go back and conduct your piers is, unfortunately, you do a long walk. And you do a long walk back to the barracks in that really soft sand, which is really sucky. But it's really cool because the last, like, I don't know, 5 clicks or so back into the barracks, everyone takes the same route. And so there's just hundreds of Ranger students on the road at the same time, and bits and pieces of the Ranger Creed are on signs leading all the way into the barracks. So it's pretty motivating. Although it's incredibly sucky to be walking, everyone knows that it's over, and everyone, although they don't tell you if you passed or not, pretty much everyone who goes to Florida usually passes. There are some exceptions, especially when it comes to piers and stuff like that, but everyone just knows that, you know, the end is near. So once you get back to the barracks, you do your piers, you turn in your squad equipment, and then it's about 3 or 4 days at Camp Rudder, and they call those the 10,000 calorie days. And what that is everyone goes to the Gator Lounge once or twice a day, and they have all kinds of fast food, from McDonald's to Little Caesars, all the candy bars and sodas you can think of, and you just get to pig out on those for 3 days. Plus, you get all your meals at the DFAC, and you get your MRE at lunch. And so you're just eating and cleaning, and it's a great time. And what they're really trying to do is they're trying to fatten you up for graduation, so that when your mom comes to see you graduate, she doesn't think that you were starved the entire time. But in reality, you actually were. So once graduation day comes, and you pin on that tab, you have just entered into a very prestigious club, and you are going to be held to a higher standard. You have 2 choices that you can make, and another choice that becomes made for you. So you can either be a tab wearer, which is a person who just wants to wear the tab and to be seen wearing the tab, kind of like the guy who wants to wear his football jersey to school on game day but doesn't actually want to play. Or you can be a tab bearer, which is where you live by that Ranger Creed, where you are a part of that brotherhood, and in everything that you do, you give 110%. And you bear that tab with pride, and you bear it with honor. And the one decision that is made for you is that you are a 10 every day when you walk in that door and you have that tab on. Even if you don't feel like a 10, even if you walk into your workplace one day and you feel like a 2 because you've been sick or your grandmother died or something, it doesn't matter. If you wear that tab, you are expected to be a 10 by the soldiers below you and the leaders above you. No matter what, you're expected to be a 10. It's a blessing and a curse all at the same time. It's gonna be hard. Ranger school is not the hard part about being a Ranger qualified person. It is the everyday activities for the rest of your Army career and being labeled as a Ranger, because you are held to a higher standard and you are expected to perform at that higher standard at every single hour of every single day. If you're able to complete this training, then I think that you are definitely up for it and that you can do it. If you can go through this training and complete it and get that tab, then you deserve all the credibility that this tab is gonna bring you, and all of the blessings and all of the curses it's gonna bring you. And I think that you're up for the challenge. In closing, guys, I wanna say thank you so much for allowing me to bring this series to you. I hope it has been helpful. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And this video series is not over yet. I'm gonna keep continuing these things with different tips and tricks for Ranger School. We're gonna go over different things you can do with your MREs to make them last longer. We're gonna go over some tie downs. We're gonna go over a couple of different things. So please stay tuned and continue to share these videos with your friends. Rangers lead the way.